Yeah, so we basically found out from Tommy that we always had extra money on top of our salary that we could distribute equally, but Anthony just chose to like keep the extra money for himself, so he was always receiving more. So that's when, so you could see how like he slowly broke our trust, and it was to the point that we just didn't want to work with him anymore, you know? Yeah, we just couldn't like trust him that much.
January 2019 is when Impression got benched from the roster, and that's when you came back in. And now actually that roster started to look a bit more like Paper Rex does than what the old Boot did. So look, this whole Impression discussion was a big talking point, obviously, when the last one was announced, when I released the Impression in retrospect. So let's get into that. Now, Boot actually removed Impression. He said he had his reasons, and if you're interested in that, you can go and look at the in retrospect with Impression. But from your perspective, I know you said you wanted to sort of clear the air and you felt like some things were missing. So what were the reasons that Boot actually got rid of Impression from that roster?
All right. Okay. Give me a sec. I have a document for this.
He's prepared.
All right. Okay, so we are mainly not doing this like out of spite for him or anything, but I feel like he left out a lot of like key details that makes it like, cause the way that the old guys like me, Tommy, splashske, and Moxie, right? We all watched it and we were like, that's not just the reason why you were benched, you know. Like he said that it was mainly because he was a bad teammate, which yes, he was to a certain extent, but he also brought up that Brunei thingy where he went to Brunei without telling us, and we thought that there was a lot of other things that led up to that benching. Yeah, so there were mainly three big like incidents that happened that really slowly built up towards that, and it all started from that gaming house that I mentioned. Yep. So when we were under like Boot, the organization wanted to experiment with a gaming house in Singapore. So they flew Harley down, DSN, sorry,
Yep.
to like oversee like the renting of the apartment and everything. And after we had everything settled, like out of the blue, Anthony just suddenly like told us, "Hey guys, by the way, Christina is coming to stay with us," which is which is at the time his girlfriend from Serbia. Yeah. So I mean the house that we rented wasn't like big by any means. It was like a decently like long living room that could house like 5 desks and just all of our PCs, and it had only 2 bedrooms to house the 6 of us, excluding excluding his girlfriend. So me, Tommy, Anthony, Nevin, Benji, that's Moxie, and Harley, the 6 of us. So me, Moxie, and DSN, we shared a room, while Anthony, Christina, Tommy, and Nevin had to share another room. Yeah, so
Doesn't
that
sound like a fun time at all.
yeah, so
How big were these rooms, by the way? Like normal bedroom size or like big bedrooms? Or are you literally like sleeping on a bed that is like touching someone else's bed? Because that feels like what it would be.
I think they were pretty small. I would say small rooms. Like it was enough to fit like 3 mattresses inside. But I think that was pretty much it. Yeah, so that must have been pretty weird for Tommy and Nevin at the start because they had to like they had to share rooms with them. But I mean, I can't say much also because Nevin like followed suit soon after, and he brought his girlfriend to stay with us also.
I'm just surprised that any of these girls wanted to do that. Like, I can imagine
right.
if I asked my girlfriend, "Oh, do you want to come live in a house with like 6 guys? Oh, by the way, you have to share a room with 2 other guys as well, and another girl." I don't even know what the response would be. It would just be like, "I'm going back to Malaysia, probably."
Yeah, but I can't say much also because Nevin's girlfriend at that time, the one that came to live with us, happened to be Anthony's younger sister.
Okay,
So
so
yeah,
whole
so you can see,
can of worms.
so Tommy had to be sandwiched. So Tommy was sandwiched between two couples, which had to be pretty awkward for him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was like one of the turning points for us. So the second one was I think it's pretty simple, but we were expecting some like prize money from a tournament we took part in, and it was like starting to get delayed. It was pretty late, so we went to ask the organizers if it's already been transferred, and they say yeah, it has been already been transferred. Then that's when like Anthony like suddenly he confessed in the like our chat group saying that he already received the prize money, but he had to use it for himself first. He didn't. I can't really remember the reason why, but he had the intention of returning it with the next salary that we received. And when we asked him like why didn't he just like ask whether he could use it first? Because we would have like we were friends, we were good friends in the term in the sense that if he just asked us, we would have said, yeah, just yeah, go ahead, just use it first if you need it. Just use it first if you need it, man. You can just return it later. But it's just like it's just a very simple thing of just asking, right? So that was like one of the problems that we had. And he basically said, like, why when we asked why didn't he just ask, he said he thought me and Moxie was like we came from well-off families, like doing okay financially, which was I don't know. I don't think it applied to us because we were still working for Boot.
Mm-hmm.
Like we weren't just living. We weren't just trying to live off our parents' money, and so before this incident, right? Boot always transferred our player salaries to him,
That seems weird.
and yeah, so after this incident, they changed it to so they transferred it to Tommy instead of Anthony, which led to the next incident. Yeah, when when we were in boot, the only way that we could get our salary was through a wire transfer from China to Singapore.
Right.
So yeah, so at the time we let like from the start of it, we let Anthony be in charge of receiving the salary and distributing it to us because he was mainly the one that could speak the best Chinese out of all of us. So he was mainly like the middleman between us and the organization. When it comes to terms of in terms of like speaking to our Chinese boss in general and like discussions and stuff. Yeah, so we didn't really ask for like screenshots of like the transfer or how much he received because we just trusted him to just give like equally. So the way with how so after the company made the change of transferring our salaries from Anthony to Tommy, right? We found out from Tommy that due to the conversion rate of Chinese RMB to Singaporean dollars, right? There was always like a considerable amount like considerable amount left over on top of our salaries. Like so for example, if each of us were to receive like maybe $1,400, the conversion rate would push it up to about 1,450. So we'll get like maybe 50 bucks more. So we found out that Anthony was pretty much skimming off all the extra money off our salaries during all the months that led up to the change of him to Tommy.
Mm.
So So we basically found out from Tommy that we always had extra money on top of our salary that we could distribute equally, but Anthony just chose to like keep the extra money for himself, so he was always receiving more. So that's when, so you could see how like he slowly broke our trust, and it was to the point that we just didn't want to work with him anymore, you know. Yeah, we just couldn't like trust him that much. And I mean, the Brunei thing was a problem because like, yeah, I don't think I was really there for that, because during that time I was in army, so I didn't have much of a say. But from what I heard, it was he basically, I mean, yeah, it was still the same thing of not asking us, you know, like things we would have been okay with, but he just didn't ask. So he just went to Brunei without telling us, and we found out because you know how in TeamSpeak you can see like the flags
Yep.
of where they're connecting from. Yeah, we suddenly saw it change to like Brunei one day, and we asked him, and he's like, "Yeah, guys, I'm in Brunei." So, so I think from then on, like DSN was pretty like he was going to the point that he just can't like deal with him anymore. And I guess like yeah, like slowly nobody just like wanted to work with him anymore.
I mean, it makes sense, right? It was kind of like a trust breakdown over the course of, I don't know, 6 months maybe, and you feel maybe a little
Mm.
bit betrayed or backstabbed or something like that in a way. So how
Mm.
did that all sort of go down? Because from his telling, he was in Brunei and everyone just stops talking in the WhatsApp group or whatever you use. What I think it was a WhatsApp group. And so he essentially just got ghosted in a way. But what did it seem like? Maybe you weren't even involved in this because you were still in the military service. But how was it communicated to him that he was removed from the team, and how did that actually go down? You know, was there an argument, or was he kind of like okay, or what?
Uh, I wasn't really around for this actually, because I was still in my basic military training, so I wasn't that involved in like his like the actual discussion of whether they still want to work with him. So I didn't really have like a say of whether he could stay or not. Yeah, so that was mainly just it was mainly between like the old guys that was in the team at the time.
All right, what do you think of the roster in the game? You know, like let's not think about out of the game. Let's not think about mentality, communication, whatever. Just as far as skill is concerned, the new roster that was put together versus the old roster that you had, what was that like after Impression was gone? I think from memory, it was Devi and Bobosaur that came back into the roster. So it was yourself, splashske, Devi, Bobo, and Alex, I think from memory, was the five.
Mm.
So was that a better roster or a worse roster in the server skill-wise than what the old boot was?
Uh, I would say it's better. I think Davai we always knew was like a sick player, and he was pretty much stuck in his own version of like Elo hell in Malaysia. So we just got him out, and yeah, we basically believed in like this roster because we also thought that with a dedicated IGL, the other four of us would have the space that we wanted to make the lineup work. And Bobosaur was also relatively new to competitive CS, but he's a quick learner, and he's pretty good. He's like a pretty good player in general. So we weren't really that we weren't that worried about him. Yeah, he just have like occasional arguments with Alex because they have like these disagreements with how, like, when we do demo reviews and stuff, they would have disagreements on how the round should have played out, like what he should have done and what he should do, and they would always like argue about it. But other than that, I think he was actually pretty good. Davai is a pretty chill guy. He's quite open to learning. He's a very, yeah, he has a pretty good work ethic, but on some days he's just like lazy as fuck. Like he'll just so right now in paper Rex we have sometimes when we do demo reviews we have like our player cameras on, so we'll just find him like lounging back, and he'll
Yeah.
just have like his vape stick just like it just blow like a giant smoke screen into the camera.
Classic CS players. All right. So then the one question that I want to ask to tie off this whole discussion around impression leaving and this new era of boot starting is, would you actually play with impression again if you were given the chance? You know, let's say if he asked you to join NG Esports, or like if it was like almost a proposition that you really couldn't say no to unless there was some kind of bad blood there. Basically, that's what I'm asking. Is there enough bad blood to prevent you from playing with him in any kind of circumstance, or is that sort of water under the bridge at this point now, like a year and a half, 2 years later?
I would say I wouldn't mind playing with him again, cause it's I mean, you don't have to like a person to be in the same team with them, you know. Like it's how you can.
It's a politically
It's
correct
how.
answer.
I mean, it's true. Like I wouldn't mind if I just didn't like a guy, but I just like if we were successful, then what do you have to complain about, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think he got the space that he needed to maybe grow as a person after leaving Boot. So maybe I would like to think that he is more matured in the sense now that he's been given a more leadership oriented role in his team and maybe in BTRG. So I think that was basically his role for the team. He was like the leader of them and he had to take care of them.
Yeah.
So maybe that let him grow as a person. I wouldn't know until I play with him again. But I wouldn't put it past him to grow as a person because he's a pretty nice guy. He just like has some maybe like tiny flaws that he could work on.
Everyone's got flaws. Some of us
Yeah.
hide them better than others. Do you guys ever kind of keep in contact? Like, I wonder how integrated the Singaporean CS scene is, because like, does everyone sort of know everyone and you kind of all still talk, or is it now very much like, okay, we're Paper Rex, this is Huat Zai, and this is Impressions Team NG Esports, and we don't really mix that much, sort of thing?
I don't think any of us have spoken to Anthony in quite a while actually, but other than that, we're actually still quite closely knitted together. Like all the Singaporean players, like everyone still talks to Moxie every now and then, and I still talk to splashske every now and then. Like every Singaporean player that we've either played with in the past, we're still quite close actually.
Okay, cool. All right, well, let's get into this new boot era discussion, because this is, you know, it's an interesting time for me, because I actually thought that this boot was going to be what sort of saved SCA Counter-Strike. Turns out it kind of didn't, unfortunately. But I thought on paper this was going to be it. So one of the first events that you sort of played with was the IEM Sydney qualifier, right? Where you actually won that. It was an SCA qualifier, to be fair, so it wasn't like the same as some of the previous years where it was an Asia qualifier where you had to play against the Chinese teams, where you had to play against the Korean teams. You did only have to play against the SCA teams, which is just by definition a bit of a weaker field. But even still, you know, a bit of a resurgent looking boot. You came first place. You actually only lost 2 maps to NASA in the first round, which you then got knocked into the lower bracket early on in classic boot fashion. But you beat Lucid Dream. You beat Alpha Red. You even come through with that 1 map disadvantage in the grand final. You still win that. So things are looking good for this new boot roster. Not only have you qualified for IEM Sydney, you also qualified for COBX Masters, which turned out to be an interesting tournament. But, you know, it's still an international qualifier that you've managed to make work. So surely now that you've gotten rid of impression, the team's feeling good, you must have this kind of honeymoon period almost. Is it a good time to be in the boot roster?
Yeah, I think everyone was in like a good headspace, I would say. Yeah, so we were all like working. We were all practicing pretty hard with what we had at the time, because I mean, yeah, I go back to the point that I was still doing this like part time, so I think we were starting to slowly practice a lot better than we used to last time, because it was that around this period where we acquired this other coach called Aikitas, Prashant. He was like one of the old 1.6 players that played in Singapore, and he helped us quite a lot as he's right now he's the CEO of So Strong.
Mhm.
Yeah. So right now he is still kind of in contact with us, but maybe not as much as last time. But he helped us grow as a team quite a lot because he was coaching us also.
Yeah, he was coaching Paper X, right, before Alex moved to coaching role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess he had, I wouldn't say a better view of CS compared to Alex. He just had a different way of how we could approach the game, and that's just how that we just followed the way that he wanted us to practice, and we just slowly started seeing the results from there.
Okay. So obviously, you guys qualified for COBX Masters, and it's not a huge event to sort of really touch on, but I kind of want to touch on it just for my own personal, because I was there, right?
Yeah.
It was interesting for me. It wasn't so bad, to be honest, as talent, but I wanted what it was like as a player because it seemed a little bit scuffed at some points. But what was your experience at COBX Masters? Because obviously, it took me a little while to get paid for that event. So you helped me out with that. But how did you feel about COBX Masters? Because to be honest, I look at that in hindsight and I'm like, you know what? If they did another event, I would probably still go, as kind of scuffed as it was.
uh it was okay for us as players. I think it was a good, I would I would say it's a good effort by the organizers to put together like the first event in India.
Hmm.
So I would say it was already pretty. I would say it was really pretty good with given what they had to work with, and uh yeah, I think I wouldn't mind going to another one maybe, but maybe not during these times.
I don't think it's gonna. I don't think there is gonna be another one. Even if it wasn't for COVID, I think that was kind of like a one and done. It was a candle that burned very brightly, but very quickly. Unfortunately for the Asian region. What were your expectations actually going into that event, by the way? Because you had Greyhound there, you had MVP there, but I feel like maybe the rest of the field you would have thought was pretty beatable.
Uh, I mean, for one, I didn't expect to get raped by mosquitos on the stage,
That's a good
but
point.
my knee, I just looked at some point during the game. I think it was against a greyhound.
Hmm.
Yes, it was greyhound. But I just looked down to my legs and it was just swelled up like a beast stung around it a few times.
I don't know about you, but I was shit scared of getting malaria there because obviously mosquitoes in India have got the malaria virus or whatever. In Australia, they don't really have that. Like you get stung by a mosquito, you're kind of whatever, so it's fine. But I haven't ever, I don't think, had a vaccine or what is the you get your shot
Yeah.
before you go. I didn't get one. I was like, I'll be fine. I'll be in a hotel all the time and there won't be any mosquitoes. And then I'm at the venue and there's just mosquitoes everywhere. So I was really, really scared. Was it the same for you? Or were you not concerned about that quite as much?
I mean, after the after that day, I just wore the longest socks I could on the second day, and it was fine from then. Yeah, but I was pretty paranoid about getting stung by all these mosquitoes afterwards.
Interesting. Yeah, it was pretty hot though. I mean, even then, I was wearing this jacket. And I was I don't really want to wear this. But anyways, all right. So whatever. COBX goes by the wayside. It's not a huge event to talk about. Just a little bit of nostalgia for you and I. IEM Sydney 2019. It is almost the same as all of these other events that we've talked about. The 2018 IEM Sydney. You kind of go in, you lose 16-9. I think you lost 16-9 to FaZe last time. It's 16-9 to Liquid this time, and then a 0-2 versus Mouse Sports again. So. I mean, what really is the difference between B.O.O.T and international teams? Why can't you, as a team, get good results? Is it just because you're a part-time team sort of thing?
I could only say that so many times, that I'm just a part-time team or whatever. But it will sooner or later it will cross at a certain point where it just becomes a repeated excuse. So I don't think we're at the point where we could say that anymore.
Are you is it just maybe these players are naturally better, genetically, or is it the scene, the infrastructure?
It felt that way to me also. I felt that they individually on maybe more sports, they were just so much better than us. Yeah, so maybe like it comes from how much work we put in, like individually,
Mm.
that really pales in comparison to what the other teams in Europe and America are doing. Yeah, so it honestly wasn't such a surprise to me that we just kept losing time and time again.
Fair enough.
Mm.
So we get into a pretty dark period of Boot then, right after IEM Sydney, and this is where Boot sort of starts to fall away from the top end of SEA Counter-Strike. Like, you're still competing. The way that I look at mid 2019 for Boot is like months of almosts, you know? You have a third place in the ESL 1 Cologne qualifier, which is a one-team qualifier. You have a second place in the Asia Minor SEA qualifier, again, a one-team qualifier. The MSI MGA 2019 qualifier, one slot, you come second. IEM Beijing qualifier, one slot, you come third. So there's like 4 or 5 events in a row where you almost make it to an international event, but you just don't quite manage to make it. So what is that like for the impact of the, you know, the morale on the team? Because this is something that myself and Pilski like to sort of talk about on Geographically Challenged, in that when the opportunities aren't there for the teams, it kind of just kills any motivation. So did this kill the motivation for Boot?
Uh, I don't think it really killed our motivation. Like we'd still like come like after each loss like this, we'll still talk about it and we're like, okay, we'll just try for the next one again. And it's just like it just repeats itself over, you know. But I feel like I've contracted some form of like PTSD from this because it's always like it's so much so many like instances where it's like should have won, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, so after a while it really does like get to you.
Is it worse to like just miss out, come second or third, than to come like fifth or sixth, you know? Because there was that period we talked about a bit earlier where you had like a few fifths and sixths, you kind of bombed out of a few tournaments. Like, what's better, to almost get there or to not even be close?
Um to almost, yeah, it's I mean definitely almost to almost get there, because it's like you start thinking about all those like things that you could have done differently that would have changed the outcome of it, right?
Hmm.
Like you think to yourself like, oh, I should have done this. We would have won if I didn't do that. Blah blah blah. And then it just like it slowly gets to you. Yeah. So that's just what happened to us like a lot actually.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, that there's a few events in there to sort of break down, but I think where this whole discussion is leading towards is ESL Pro League Season 10 and eXTREMESLAND 2019, where you come 5th, 6th in both, and these are kind of the last events that you play in as Boot. Now, it's fairly obvious to the outside by this point that there's sort of something going wrong in the Boot camp, and we're not really sure what it is. It's just that the results have kind of dropped off a cliff. We're kind of wondering why, because players are really good individually, but something's not working as a team. And it's almost to the point where the results aren't really acceptable considering where Boot was at previously, if that makes sense. So what's the mentality at in the team at the moment? Because this is the time where I think actually Boot stopped paying you. So am I correct in that assumption, or how much of an impact did that actually have on the poor results in, you know, mid to late kind of 2019?
Mm, I don't think not getting paid had anything to do with our bad results. Like, it didn't really impact us that much. It was just a matter of like, oh, when are they gonna pay us? It didn't really like affect our game. But in terms of like our gameplay, I guess it's just that dynamic that all of us couldn't really work together as well. Like we always had disagreements about stuff. And honestly, we were just like so lazy as a team. Yeah, we didn't really have the right work ethic we needed to make it work.
Okay. So when you went to Extreme Zone 2019, you went without boot jerseys. So this was the first time that I sort of heard about this whole payment issue. Was that like a meant to be kind of a statement where you were like, okay, we're not boot anymore, or was that almost a thing you were trying to use to sort of say to the team like, okay, we're kind of fed up, but you know, maybe there's still some coming back from this, or what was the whole thought process behind no jerseys? Am I reading a bit too much into it?
Uh, I mean, yeah, I would say like it was mainly because they weren't paying us, so it's just like a very like small form of protest. Yeah, that's just basically what it was.
I remember an Australian team doing something similar in Team Fortress 2. They had played under Team Immunity for like a couple of years, and then they qualified for an international tournament, and Team Immunity didn't want to help them like go there, so they had to like crowdfund their flights and whatever. And so instead of playing as Team Immunity, they played as like Team Australia or something like that. Which, you know, it sort of seems like similar to you, right? Where you've just sort of been like with this organization for such a long time, and then they've kind of screwed you over a little bit, and you're like, well, why should I represent you? So anyway, you get to that point there where you do leave Boot. So I want to know, how was this decision made? Like you said, it was pretty much just part of your contract where if you didn't get paid for 3 months, you could leave, but you were kind of getting ghosted by the organization. You didn't, you know, was there ever a discussion of, okay, we are going to leave if you don't pay, or did you just leave?
I mean, yeah. So there's a clause in the contract where if they just don't pay us for 3 months, that the contract automatically breaks. So after the 3 month period, we were just like, you're already free to do whatever you want. So, it was after COBX actually that they wanted to try a full-time team. So they basically spoke to me and Splashske because we were the only two guys that could. We were the only two part-time guys that could do it at the time, and they told us that, hey, we're gonna try going full-time. Are you guys like okay with it? Like maybe this could work, but maybe not. Like maybe this is just the wrong time. So I think me and Splashske were okay with it. Yeah, like yeah, sure, go for it. Yeah, so that's when we broke off after boot, and me and Splashske went to form Huat Zai.
Right.
Yeah, from there. Yeah.
So, okay, that's interesting because like that seems like a weird timeline, right? Because I thought that you joined Huat Zai. The way that in my mind this worked was everyone decided to leave Boot and join Huat Zai or join Paper X or join whatever team they ended up going to. But it was kind of like the team disbanded because of the payment issues and because of the performances with Boot, and you all just went your separate ways because you felt it couldn't work together. But it seems like that wasn't necessarily the case. Like you and splashske decided to join Huat Zai, and is that somehow tied into the Boot organization, or what is going on here?
No, so basically when we left, it was so Alex, Bobosaur, and Davai went to find two more players to try and form like a full-time lineup to see how far it could go if they could really commit to it with
the
like
Boot, with the
Aikitas
Boot
and
org,
stuff.
you mean?
No, not with the boot org.
Okay.
So they were done. They were already done with the boot org. They were gonna find like a entirely different org, but just with like the new roster.
Okay. Which became
Yeah.
Paper X in
So
the end.
yeah. So me and Splashke just basically said, because we still wanted to play, but we didn't necessarily need an org. So we just found another three guys and asked them, hey, you wanna just play for fun? And that's basically how like Huat Zai was formed.
Well, I mean, on that topic, right? It seemed to me that like if I look at that Boot roster, I almost felt like Huat Zai got the two better players. You know, I've always been a big fan of the Benkai splashske duo. I'm also a big fan of Divide, but I feel like in a way, Huat Zai got the better end of the stick almost, even despite the fact that you guys weren't looking to play full time. So it seemed weird to me that like the other three went to join the better org, but then you two went to join Huat Zai. So I was always a bit wondering why it ended up being that case. But it's obviously, like you said, because you didn't really necessarily want to commit to full time in the game. Was that because you were still doing military service and you found it a bit too difficult to commit full time? And you know, because from my perspective, it looks like from the outside, you know, you've almost in a way given up on going pro at that point. It's like, well, I've had my time. I had some good moments. I'm in military service. I'm getting a bit older now. I kind of have to just like play for fun and live my real life. Is that almost the mentality that you went into Huat Zai with?
Uh, the mentality I had when forming that team was I was just gonna it's just like a temporary home for me until I finish my military service, because like I still wanted to play, but maybe not as intently as the Paper X guys. So it was just like a for fun thing. So me and Nevin just went to approach like other guys in the Singaporean region that was just like we knew that they were sharp. Yeah, so we brought back Splashke's older brother. He used to play also.
Mhm.
And then we brought another two young guys that we always knew were sharp from like the teams that we played against last time.
Did you have any other offers at the time? Because to me, I feel like Benkai and splashske, right? If I'm any team in Asia, I'm kind of having a bit of a look-see to see if I can get those guys on my roster. Would you have entertained rosters, and did you even get any offers when you left the Boot org?
Uh, not as like not as an individual actually. No, I mean even if I did, I wouldn't have said yes, because I mean still I was waiting for military service to finish.
Mhm.
So, but as a team, when we played together after a while, there were like maybe like one or two organizations that wanted to pick us up, but we didn't really feel like uh, their offer was worth picking up. And I also didn't really want to sign anything, because I formed the team with the intention of leaving when I ended my military service, because it's for me it's just I do want to commit to trying to play full time. Yeah, because all this time I couldn't actually do it full time. So I
Yeah.
was just thinking like, yeah, if I could do it full time, like how far can I go? So that's how I thought about this HZ roster.
Did the other teammates know that at the time? Like when you formed the roster, were you pretty clear in saying like I'm gonna leave in six to 9 months or whatever when I'm done with military service? Because obviously now you've finished it, right? So it was pretty quick that once that started to roll around, you were in the Paper X roster. So was that communicated to the team at the time, like they knew?
Yeah, they definitely knew. Like before I formed it, I already told Splashke that I'm just gonna do this temporarily until my military service is done. Then after that, I'll find a more like permanent solution.
All right. Well, speaking of that permanent solution, you're now in Paper X, so this is a good time to have a bit of a discussion about that. And Paper X is a whole can of worms that I think we can have a bit of an interesting discussion about because, you know, again, it seems to be one of those rosters that's just another iteration of Boot. It's gone this whole distance. It's spanned like 2 to 3 years, and it's like, this is where you guys have ended up now. So you had that very short stint in Huat Zai. The Paper X offer rolls around. How did that sort of come into effect? Was that always like on the horizon because you'd played with them before and you knew DSN? I suppose you probably knew Nick as well pretty well. Did you always sort of expect to get the Paper X roster when you were coming to the close of your military service, or were you happy to entertain other ideas as well?
Uh, I think DSN said that DSN did tell the team like right when it formed that sooner or later we're gonna have to call Ben to come back or something. So near the end of my military service, I just got a call from him asking if I was still interested in joining.
Hmm.
But I just told him that I would basically look for other offers first. And I did get a few offers. For one, I pretty much just weighed like the pros and cons of each offer, and I think I made the right decision with PaperX because of this like pandemic thingy. I mean, it's equally hard to find a job, so I'm quite grateful that I could find one and allow me to stay in Singapore at the same time.
What do you mind sharing what the other offers were? Not necessarily how much they were for or whatever, but was there any interesting teams that we might have seen Benkai on in an alternate reality?
Uh, uh, there were one or two Chinese teams, and I know Lucid Dream also asked me to join.
I mean, I was going to say, I feel like that would have been the one of the more obvious ones because they had the two Koreans, so they would have been looking internationally, and you would have been
Yeah.
a fairly decent fit, I think, in that roster. When you say Chinese teams, you don't have to name names if you don't want to, because it seems you're a little reluctant. But what kind of tier? Like, are we talking like top tier? Are we talking like mid tier, kind of middle of the pack Chinese teams? I imagine.
Uh, I would say mid, bordering into top.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's very interesting. Maybe you can tell me when we're not recording, because I really do want to know which one it was then. Anyways, we'll move on from that. We'll keep that little tantalizing nugget for perhaps another day. What did you actually initially think of the Paper X experiment before you joined it? Because I think, looking at that roster, the results really weren't so much there. So were you a bit hesitant when you did join the roster that like maybe the team just wasn't functioning to the level that you'd want it to?
I think before I joined, when you look at the roster, you just didn't think that it was good enough, just like the caliber of players that they had. So when Harley gave me the call, he told me that they would be making roster moves because they were going to replace, at the time it was Sabi and Bobosaur. So he already told me that they were looking to replace those two guys, and that I would have a say on what kind of team was going to be built and what kind of players that I thought was good enough to come in.
Okay.
So yeah, I joined them with that thought in mind that I could slowly shape it with players that I think could be at the top.
So how much of an impact did you really have then? Because it's obviously ended up being you and Forsaken that joined. So was he someone that you sort of headhunted personally, or was this more of a team kind of a thing and you were just like, yep, I'll sign off on that and I'll join as well? Or how'd that all sort of play out?
So before we had Forsaken, I still would have joined anyway. I think, like so it was for a period it was me, Alex, Davai, and Mindfreak. So even then, I already had like I was mainly the one that suggested why don't we take Forsaken. So but during that time he was in that
The Weibo
that
team.
that JMT roster. Yeah, but they suddenly broke off so early, which was like a blessing for us because we immediately just picked him up. And he turned out to be like I think he's one of the best players in our team now. He just needs time to grow as a person.
Well, that's the word on the street, right? That he's supposed to be like the next prodigy. He's supposed to be the next Ben Ted or the next Benkai, maybe. Do you get that? Do you get that sense? I know he's probably going to watch this, and so you maybe want to be a bit of a nice guy because you're his teammate. But where do you think he actually sits? Is he worth all of the hype, or is he maybe not at that level?
Uh, he's definitely worth the hype. He just needs time, a bit more time to grow. Yeah, because right now he's still I would say he still needs the experience because this is like the very first like real team that he's been in. Yeah, and the guy really just plays a shit ton. Like he's at that age where you just don't get tired. Last time when you could like pull like 12 hours, like straight 12-hour playthroughs of any game that you like,
Yeah.
he's at that age and he just doesn't stop. Yeah, so he just like.
Now I play a few hours, my back starts to get sore. Already now, we've been recording for 2 hours. I'm like, oh, I need to get up and have a bit of a stretch in a little bit. Okay, so then the one final question about the roster itself is like, obviously, splashske, he's doing military service at the moment, as far as I understand. So is that like a primary factor why he's not on the roster? Or like, let's say, is it the same situation for him as it was for you in that maybe once that military service is over, we see a return to the top, or do you think he's kind of done? Because from what the discussions that I've had with him, he feels, at least it feels to me like he's not that interested in competing at the top level anymore.
I feel right now he's pretty much in the same situation as I was, as like in terms of he doesn't really want to commit to anything until his army is done. Yeah, so right now he's just making the most out of what he has right now, which is his time in Huat Zai. So when that ends, I'm fairly certain that he's gonna come back. He's just so good. He's too good not to leave.
I agree. But I don't want to be the only proponent for saying that, because then I'll be looking like a dickhead when he doesn't come back. So I need someone else there to be with me to sort of hype things up. But yeah, I don't know. Do you think there's a spot for him on Paper X is the main question, I suppose. Let's say in a year's time or whatever. Is Paper X even going to exist in a year? That's also a question that we have to answer later on.
As an org, I don't know. But I think we'll definitely be open to having splashske back. But that really depends on where his head is after he's done with army. Yeah, and whether, because I'm not sure if there will be like a role clash between all the players, because like then would have like three guys that have like this very flashy playstyle, like Davai, Forsaken, and Splashske together all in one. So I'm sure it could work, but maybe if like the guys in my team have to be willing to sacrifice some parts in order to make it work. Like it's not gonna be just Nevin joining and everything's working out fine.
Indeed.
That's be like, yeah.
So that's something that you've actually sort of had to face as well. You mentioned you've had a bit of a role change over the course of your career. And so we'll talk about what you're doing now in Paper X, right? Now that you've joined. So I understand you're actually the in-game leader, right? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, I am the in-game leader, and I switched up to like a very more support role where I just stay behind, I call from the back, and I just like offer flashes and stuff to help my teammates instead of me being the one like last time. So back then I would be the one in front just saying like, hey, I want to go kill this guy, I'm gonna go do this.
Yeah.
But instead, like I'm letting my teammates do that now.
How do you feel about that? Okay. Like, is there a little bit of you that goes, fuck man, that could be me?
I'm at a point where I don't really care if, cause like in my team, right, I'm one of the guys that could just close out the rounds if needed to. I'm like one of the better clutchers in the team, so I'm also okay with just staying back and maybe like surviving. But right now, I'm actually quite happy with calling now because right now they didn't let last time they didn't let me call because we didn't have enough firepower to have someone like me behind calling. But right now I think I have more than enough firepower to be able to do that. Yeah, so it doesn't really put as much pressure on me to frag out compared to last time.
It's interesting. So I think for the rest of your career, it probably seems like you are going to be in that position. It's like the same kind of career that most people have. It's like they'll start their career as like a star or, one of those mad fraggers. Then they get a bit older. The young guys come through and you sort of let them have their turn. And now you're going to live out the rest of your career as an IGL, probably. Especially because there aren't that many actually in Asia, right, that are worth their salt. So if you can be a good IGL, you're going to be worth a lot. I do want to know what your opinion is of this Paper X roster so far this year, because I don't want to be too mean here, but like I look at that roster on paper and I think you should have had better results than you have. So what is the reason for the performances so far, and what has 2020 been like for you? Because I can understand how it might have been difficult with this whole COVID situation. I understand you were supposed to have the whole team in Singapore. That's not possible at the moment, obviously. But what's it been like? Is it kind of like a bridge year where you're just like, well, let's just forget about the results of 2020 and focus on 2021? Or are these results really kind of weighing on your mind because you've not been able to qualify for any of these top 4 tournaments, even despite playing in a lot of the qualifiers? I think I watched you guys even play in the DreamHack qualifier where you were playing against, was it Bren? And you like almost 16-0'd them on Mirage or something. I was like, oh, shit, that was good. And then Tiger beats you again. It's just like, it's always Tiger that seems to be the thorn in your side. So how's this all sort of coming together for Paper X at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, on the side note, we just played Tiger on Friday?
In the ESEA finals?
Yes, the ESEA finals. It's another one that we should have won again. Yeah, so I mean, things are actually looking up for me actually in 2020 because we already did so much with maybe we've been together for about 1.5 months now. So I think I couldn't be too mad about the results that we have because I think it's really pretty good. We could take teams like we could start like smashing teams like Brand. we start taking teams like Tiger closer, maybe like Beyond, and you could slowly you can slowly see the progress. Like it's slowly getting there, but we just need more time, I think. So we can't be affected by these should have won things again. It's just so we have this sports psychologist now, right? Her name is Michelle.
Yeah, she's from
Basically
Australia, right?
she yeah.
Yeah, I know.
And she basically imposed this growth mindset onto all of us. Like basically every loss that we take, we're just growing that much more. So that's I think we're all in a good headspace where we all want to win equally as bad, and we are willing to put in the work for it. And it's starting to show in the results. So that's why I think this lineup can go further than the old boot one.
Interesting. Where do you think you sit right now in the Asian ecosystem, right? I think it's pretty obvious we've got Tyloo and Vici, number 1 and 2. Whatever you want to talk, which way. I mean, I guess Tyloo's number 1. There's no question, but some of us think Vici could be. Anyways, where does things sit from there, right? Is it like Invictus in third? Or I don't know if you were watching yesterday when we were talking about this on IEM Beijing. But we are of the opinion that Invictus maybe isn't doing enough to deserve that third invite slot in every single tournament. Maybe they should go back into a qualifier and have 2 qualifier spots. So where are you sitting in that if we consider PaperX probably still consistently losing to Tiger? So you must be maybe sitting between 5th to 10th kind of place somewhere in the Asian ecosystem. There's Beyond as well to think about, Bren, Sigma, these kinds of teams. Where do you sit in that mix?
I think I think Tiger and Beyond, I may be on the same level.
So they're probably 4th, 5th kind of thing.
Yeah, but right now, a lot of Mongolian CS is like the new Thai CS. There's so many good Mongolian teams now, and I think I think Tiger and D13 are on the same level. Maybe Beyond is slightly below that because Beyond is also a very if everyone's on point that day, they'll just be smashing everyone cleanly, and I'll put us on the same level as Bren. Yeah, I think that's a fair judgment.
I would say so. Bren hasn't qualified for any of these big tournaments, but they're kind of the almost there team for the better part of 2020. I feel like I feel like they are very, very similar to Bren in that, to PaperX, I should say, in that there's a good roster, but for some reason, there's something holding them back from actually qualifying for anything that's really relevant. There are a few tournaments here and there that they play in, but what I really care about is these top 4 tournaments. I'm talking Beijing, I'm talking DreamHacks, whatever. If it's not a tournament that I cast, I don't really care that much. I do. I'll tune into the ESEAs every now and then, but I don't think that there's that much relevance from those results compared to these bigger ones. Anyways, what is the future of PaperX in 2021? Because we've more or less caught up to current day, so we're getting toward the end of the interview. So I want to know what is your expectation for next year?
Definitely to bring all of the guys down to Singapore so that we can train in the office that we have. I think that's a step that we need to really take it to that next level. We have to put ourselves in a environment where we are forced to learn and to practice together, and there's literally nothing else we can do because at home you have all of these distractions and stuff, so it might not be as conducive as an office would be. But we also, at the same time, we don't really want a oboe situation, we don't want Forsaken missing his family and stuff. So we have to approach this quite delicately.
It shouldn't be as extreme as what it was for oboe, because North America to Europe is a big jump. But I think Indonesia to Singapore isn't quite as much of a big deal. I've never been to Indonesia, and actually I've never been to Singapore. I've only been through the airport. But I imagine Singapore and the surrounding countries are at least fairly similar in terms of just feel, in terms of I live here. It's it's not that much different kind of thing. Especially if you speak English, right?
I think Singapore is compared to Indonesia, it's a lot more well developed, as like a whole country, like our economy, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But I think maybe it wouldn't be that bad for Forsaken to come over, because we also have another Indonesian guy on our team. So somewhat he would still feel like he's at home.
Mhm.
But at the same time, maybe I think he'll handle it quite well, because he's actually really mature for his age. A lot more mature than I was at 16. Yeah, so I wouldn't be too stressed about him. But in terms of what we are looking forward to in 2021, I think we're just gonna try to realistically, we can win our first event by March. I would put that date as the date that we should be able to practice. We should have practiced enough to be able to win some of these like qualifiers and events already. Because right now we're already so close when we
Mm.
play these like qualifiers and stuff. We just need that extra bit of experience to get us over.
Sure. All right. Well, we've pretty much caught up with 2020. We're basically to current day. It's November right now in 2020. So that's more or less the end of the the chronology basically. But I always have a few bonus questions at the end of these interviews to get into that we couldn't really fit necessarily into the whole storyline. So there's a few here that I think are going to be pretty interesting. The first one is where do you think SEACS is headed in 2021? Because that's obviously quite important to a team like yourselves, where if that whole ecosystem kind of collapses, either you now have to start playing more in like the Chinese Counter-Strike kind of tournaments, which you may be doing anyway, or you may be intending to do anyway. But it seems to me that SEACS is definitely taking a backward step with Valorant coming through, and Thai region seems to have died, Korean region seems to have died, Japanese region seems to have died. So where do you sort of see things going in 2021? You can include COVID if that factors into your thoughts as well.
Um, I think things are really like they are taking a step back in like where as far as SEACS is concerned, because like I would say that Valorant played a big part in this, because a lot of the CS players moved on to Valorant, like the old MVP guys, like they moved over. The Japanese guys, they went to form Jupiter. Uh, the Thai guys, a lot of the Thai guys like Lucid Dream disbanded, and a lot of the guys went over to Valorant as well, like PTC, like those guys. So I wouldn't like it's not really looking up that well in terms of the frequency of tournaments that we might get. So the only thing that I'll be looking forward to is mainly all those like IEMs and ESL events. And maybe like we could still play the ESCA season, because that's something that's always consistent.
Are
Yeah.
you a bit
So
concerned with the way that that's headed?
uh maybe to a certain extent, yes, but also no, because I feel like Valorant is gonna it's gonna ride the same path as Overwatch did, where it started really well as an esport, and then slowly it would just slowly die off. Because to me, right, when I watch Valorant, it's just so fucking boring, like I don't know if you've casted any of the games, but I feel like there's not that big of like the element of randomness in that game. Like, so when you see like a Brimstone in a 1v1 situation and he has an ulti, you really know he's gonna he's gonna drop his ulti on the bomb, and they're gonna win the round straight out. Yeah, there's that. As a spectator sport, I wouldn't say it doesn't bring as much excitement as it does compared to CS. So maybe Valorant just needs some time to die down before CS can flourish again.
You see any of those players maybe coming back, right? If Valorant doesn't perform as well as they might have hoped it, do you think, MVP might come back? You got a dog.
Sorry.
Go on ham.
Yes.
That's all right. We'll keep that in. People love
It's a
dogs.
squeaky it's a squeaky dog.
A squeaky dog
I
indeed.
could bring her to the camera later if you want.
Maybe. But yeah, do you ever see any of those guys coming back maybe to Valorant? To CS, I should say, from Valorant?
Uh if Valorant takes off, like definitely no. because right now I think everyone has the benefit of starting at the same time, as compared to in CS, where if you're an aspiring like Asian player, you would have to start where all the North American and European teams are already so far ahead, and you have a lot of catching up to do. But that doesn't exist in Valorant.
Hmm.
Like everyone is just starting off at the same place. So I think like I'm just waiting for that event where that international event where all the Koreans are put up against like all the North Americans and stuff. That'll be, I think that'll be exciting to see. But maybe I think COVID is actually into their favor by delaying these international tournaments, because like it'll just keep them practicing until that day comes.
Hmm.
So we won't really know how well Valorant will take off until that international event takes place. And until then, COVID is gonna keep them practicing for that international event, and they'll keep the players from coming back to CS.
It's an
That's a
interesting
bit,
take. But I guess it
yeah.
makes sense. All right. Well, on a bit of a different topic then, have you or would you ever consider playing outside of Singapore? I think we kind of answered that a little bit. But let's say Paper X disbands and, what's the next move then? Do you potentially go to a team like NG Esports, which is a multinational team? Would you consider playing in a Chinese team? I don't even know if you speak Mandarin at all. But are these options for someone like you?
Uh, yeah, I would like to. Like, I wouldn't mind playing overseas, and I can speak Mandarin actually.
Hmm.
It was my second language. I had to take it in school, so uh, yeah. If an offer comes that looks promising enough for me to move to another country, I will do it.
Okay, interesting. And there hasn't ever been really any apart from that Kings one, right?
Uh, yeah, and sadly that was like before military, so now I don't know. I'll just have to right now I feel like I should just make the most of my of this year and next year
Mhm.
to really establish myself as a decent enough player to be able to join another roster overseas.
Interesting. Any of the Australian teams watching this? Benkai's on the market. Maybe not on the market per se, but could be convinced, at least. Let's say that much. Now, I don't know if you heard over the last month or so, there was these sort of. I mean, I suppose you probably did, right? Because you're fairly close to Nick, who is obviously the owner of CS:GO to Asia, and they reported on this that Guam server sort of event thing. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, so I want to just get your TLDR. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. For those viewing that don't know, there's a company that's trying to make servers in Guam, which is kind of like the middle point between Australia and Asia. And even like apparently there's a half decent ping from the west coast of NA that they're trying to set this tournament up and get a bunch of teams to play in it. And apparently it should be like 60 ping to Australia and like 40 ping to Singapore or whatever, something like that. So that all these teams could theoretically play, and it kind of closes the distance between Australia and Asia and makes it less geographically challenged, so to speak. But do you think this could work, Benkai, or is this a far-fetched dream?
Uh, it definitely could work. Like it's quite an exciting prospect that someone wants to take this up.
Hmm.
But I actually think we could actually do it before, because Singaporeans have pretty good ping to servers in Perth. Like we just practiced against Renegades like last week or something, and we had like 40 ping, and they had maybe the same ping or so. And we could already do it, but it's just a matter of the other Asian countries whether their routing allows
Yeah.
them to do so. So maybe the Guam one. I, I mean, I don't know how stable the servers will be. Like me, like I made a joke about it to my team. Like the servers will stop working once the kid on the bicycle stops like cycling, because it's like powered by. I made a joke about how
A
the
guinea
servers
pig,
are powered
basically.
by a.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm hoping it works out. Yeah. I fully support the organizers.
Are you guys going to play in that tournament? Do you know?
If we can, definitely. Yeah.
Okay,
We're
interesting.
just gonna join as much as we're just gonna join like as many tournaments as we can.
Yeah, I think on the topic, by the way, of the Perth server, it's really just exclusive to Singapore because there is that direct line from Singapore to Perth. But for all the other countries, like like if you were in China, you'd have to route through Singapore to get to that, and then there's already that extra added bit of latency. So really only you guys probably that can practice against the Australian teams to any decent degree. I'm kind of surprised that you haven't done that more often.
Yeah, same.
You know?
I didn't even realize that we could that we had such a decent ping until like when we actually practiced against Renegades. So I think like I feel like it opens up a lot more windows for us. Like we could start practicing against a lot more Australian teams now.
You know, I wonder if that would like, you know, in an ideal world after COVID, make Singapore the hub of Counter-Strike in Asia in a way. Like, you know how a lot of teams at the moment are trying to go into China, right? Tiger had their main base supposedly in China, but they're still in Mongolia because of COVID. But in the long term, they were going to go to China. And, you know, there's all these other teams that like, they seem to have their home base in China. But does it, I mean, do you get better ping from China maybe to like Europe or something that they could potentially scrim European teams? I wouldn't have thought that you would. But at least if you have all your players in Singapore, then you can scrim ANZ teams, which is, I think, a big bonus for Asian teams. But I suppose the only issue with Singapore is it's quite expensive compared to other Asian countries.
Yeah. I think a lot of teams choose to be in China because it's just so easy to make money there, and it's also cheap at the same time. So that's how all these like Chinese bosses could keep their organizations up and running. But in Singapore, it's a really different ball game. Like they're very strict on in terms of like the prospects of starting an organization. You have to go through quite a lot of paperwork to register one, and you would also have to pay. You would also have to make sure that you pay your players legally, and I guess that's just not as big of a challenge as it is in China compared to here. I think that's why a lot of teams hasn't like really done the move to Singapore yet, because it's just really hard to start something here if you are not Singaporean.
Maybe the cons outweigh the pros in that aspect, it seems like.
Yeah.
So one of the other topics that I think will be quite relevant is NG Esports. You know, this is a team that you're probably going to be fighting for a lot of spots with next year. So what do you think of that NG roster, right? As we know, it is theoretically confirmed as 5. So far, only 4 have been announced. But
I mean, we all know who you already. It's not like it's the worst kept secret.
So what do you think of that? What do you think of that experiment to begin with? You think, you know, a multinational team pulling kind of the best bits of each region can work? And, you know, is it a team that you're kind of afraid of in a way, or do you think they're going to be a really solid roster?
I'm sure there'll be a really solid roster in like given time, but I don't know. We just have to see, right? Because like you don't know how well they're gonna be communicating as a team because of like language barriers and stuff. But like my team thinks that there's a pretty huge role clash in their team.
What is the role clash, by the way? Because Pilsky has mentioned this on Geographically Challenged, in that he thinks there isn't enough aggressive players in that roster.
Yeah,
so
exactly. So you have, so you have like Urcast, right? You have Zine, and you have CBBK, which are historically not known, like players that are not known to be very aggressive. They're like the guys that you send in the second or third to trade, to start trading, you know. So I mean, I guess it could work out, but Anthony has to be like, he has to call in a way that's really selfless, in a way that he trusts his team to be the ones mopping up after he runs in.
Maybe he has to take that advent route where he's like the first guy into the bomb site on the T side, and just sort of hope that he's got the superstars behind him, you know, Jam Young and Kaze and whatever the fuck doing. Like, you could literally go like 5 and 20, but as long as every single kill is traded, it's kind of fine.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's the only way that that's the only way that I think that lineup could work.
Okay, fair enough. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm positively hopeful that they're going to be able to make something happen here. We're at the end of the interview, so the very last question that I like to ask people is, why do they have a fucking dog in their lounge room while I'm trying to do an interview? No, that's not true.
Wait. Let me get her. Wait, give me a sec.
All right, we're getting a dog spot. This is the first time for In Retrospect to get a dog on camera. There we go.
She's just so angry sometimes, you know.
This is a new experience for me. No, I totally understand. I have a puppy now, and he just barks. For no
Yeah,
reason.
you just hate strangers. I don't know why.
Yeah. So, okay, the very last question then is actually, what's the biggest regret of your career? You know, what do you wish you could have changed if you could go back in time?
Uh, I feel like there were a lot of times where we were just like delaying the inevitable. Like we knew that this roster wasn't something that was gonna work in the long term, but all of us were just like too nice to like face that reality, you know. We were just like hopeful of that. So there are a lot of times where I would regret that. Um, and maybe not joining Kings,
Yeah.
actually. I feel like that's one of the regrets. But it's not something that I could be too upset about because it's literally something I couldn't do.
But now you can.
I mean, yeah, but now I can. So
Renegades.
yeah,
Order, Avant. I mean, there's been a few roster changes. I think Chiefs is looking for a player. But anyways, we'll leave it
I thought
there.
all the Chiefs guys went to Valorant, right? They're playing under order, like
The old Chiefs guys, yeah. But there's
yeah,
a new Chiefs
Techstar.
roster, yeah. So it's a different team. Anyway, that is the end of In Retrospect with Benkai. So it's been great to have you on. I feel like this is probably your first interview, apart from that one that you did for Paper X, but this is definitely a bit of a longer one. So it's been pretty interesting to hear your insights into how your career's gone. Did you want to throw any shout outs out there? Anyone that you want to say hello to, or where people can find you on Twitter and what have you?
Uh, I mean, I'm sure you could. I'm sure you could follow me on Twitter if you want to see like a lot of memes and stuff. Because that's what I just repost. Just retweet a lot of memes. Uh, Shoutouts I could go to Nick, CEO of PaperX, for believing in this, for being so passionate in the project. DSN also, is one of the guys that formed the company. Matt, he's the CEO also. Gad, it's also a part of management. My girlfriend, we
It's a
just
good
got
one.
a we just got an apartment together. Like but we only move in like 5 years, so it's still a long time. But I mean, it's still something to look forward to.
It's a long commitment to just get a house. Is that how it
Yeah,
works in Singapore? You just have to like apply to get a house or an apartment or whatever. Is it being built, right? Or
yeah. It's this thing called build to order.
right?
So yeah, so you get your slot in and you move in like maybe when it's done, like 5 years later. So it's just a lot cheaper compared to buying a
Already built.
resale house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So yeah, so that's something I can look forward to. So other than that, not really any shoutouts. Miki, you wanna say anything? Come here. Look. She's just struggling.
Camera shy. That's fine. Most people are camera shy until they sort of get a bit more used to it. Anyway, look, let's leave it there, Benkai. It's been great to have you. Obviously, you guys can follow Benkai CS on Twitter. He doesn't have that many Twitter followers, so gas him up, as the kids say these days, I think. Obviously, you can follow me as well at ElfishGuy. I'd appreciate if you would check out my Patreon as well, patreon.com/ElfishGuy, so that I can do more interviews like this. And hope to see you in the next In Retrospect.
Waste some time.